Hello, it's Sarah. This is Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here with a little bit of a catch-up video to make. I usually do a week of reading video where I talk about what I read, what I'm currently reading, and about to read, but the BookTube Prize kind of threw a little bit of a wrench. BookTube Prize and life. Things got really busy the last couple weeks, and the only things that I read were BookTube Prize books, and I couldn't talk about them. So I can talk about them now. I'm going to be filming a video specifically related to that, so be on the lookout for that. But because of that, I finished those and a few more. So let's kind of get into all of the things that I read, and I'll try to make it brief. So the first thing that I finished, I said I wasn't going to read any more of these, but I had a NetGalley that I wanted to keep my rating up. I knew it would be an easy, light read, so I just decided, okay, let's just jump into it. And that is Auntie, Poldi and the Lost Madonna. This is by Mario Giordano, and it is translated from the German by Brownjohn. I really liked the first of this series. This is a series, it's like a cozy mystery series set in Sicily. And the setup is that there's a German woman who's always wanted to move to Sicily. And she, after the death of her husband, she decides that she's going to retire there. While she's there, she just starts to solve these crimes. And she's like this really audacious character, really wild, loud, lascivious, promiscuous, bold, she's just an interesting character. I love an older woman character. I like really brash characters, really kind of out there, outrageous characters. And our narrator is actually her nephew that will come and live with her because the family's always worried that she's going to drink too much and kill herself. So he's kind of like her minder that lives in the house with her on occasion. He'll kind of come and go as he's writing his book, and he thinks he's going to be writing about his family's history in Sicily. He's not a very good writer, but it adds some comic elements. The whole thing is a send up. It's really farcical, and what I liked about the first one has grated on my nerves as the series has gone on. So I just don't have any more love for this series. It's kind of gone. It's gone off the rails. So each one now feels like it's upping the ante in outlandishness, in actual ridiculousness. You would read something like this if you actually don't care at all about being tethered to reality. Like, it really feels like the author is just like any whimsy that comes into his mind, he will just throw in there and see if it sticks. And for me, it's too much. So I didn't like it, won't be continuing, and definitely no more NetGalleys for me of this one. But I did read something that was phenomenal. I couldn't wait for Women in Translation month, which is this month. So I started this Farewell Ghosts by Nadia Terranova. This is translated by Anne Goldstein, and as I mentioned, she is the translator for the Elena Ferranti series, the Neapolitan series. And I loved this book. From the very first few sentences, it really captured me. We have the story of like a 30-something woman. She's married, she does not have children, and she's kind of in a marriage that is very comfortable, but lacks passion. And in fact, her entire life is lacking passion right now. Has retreated into herself, and she's forced to confront her childhood, which includes a really difficult mother and a father who abandoned them and just disappeared, and they don't know if he's alive or dead. He's never been heard from since. He was suffering from a severe depression, and one day he just left and never came back, and they literally don't know anything about him. We have her returning home because her mother needs to fix these things. And so there's all these themes that are kind of interwoven about past and memory and what we hold on to and what we let decay. I think the translation was just so rich. The writing was so good. It felt very atmospheric. It felt very like Italian, very modern, current. When I say modern, I mean like more contemporary. I just absolutely loved it. And I would love to know, are there anything similar that you've read, like Farewell Ghost, that you think I would like from Italian women writers? Because, you know, it is Women in Translation Month, you know. So far I've read Natalia Ginsburg, which I adored, and I have a few more of hers teed up. This is my Women in Translation queue of things. I've got Natalia Ginsburg, some books right here. But this was just such a great way to whet my appetite for Women in Translation Month. So I'm so glad that I read it. Then, keeping with the Italian theme, I'm thinking of travel again, and I'm starting to dream about travel again. And especially as we were opening back up before the Delta variant really started taking off again, I just was longing to read about other places. And one of the places that I want to return to is Italy. So I think I've mentioned before that I've been doing Duolingo French for almost a year. And so I just added Italian, I would say about 2 months ago. And now I've spoken multiple languages at varying degrees at very different times in my life. So it's not that too much of a burden to add it in. And I'm really, really enjoying it. It's allowing me to understand French better and pick up Italian more quickly, which I didn't expect. But that's neither here or there. What I wanted to show you is this book that I picked up. Dianne Hales wrote a previous book called Bella Lingua that I really liked. It was about her learning Italian, and I might actually return to that now that I'm back to trying Italian. This is called La Passione, How Italy Seduced the World. She's an American. She lives in San Francisco, kind of here in the Bay Area. There was a big thing earlier in the 2000s where it was like how the Irish created civilization, how the Irish saved civilization, how the Greeks created civilization. Well, this is her version of that type of trope. And it really is a look at different aspects of the contributions that Italy has made to culture, to world culture, you know, art, fashion, food, these types of things. And she takes a really personal approach and talks about how she has encountered some people and the things that she's learned. And she has a lot of access and has been given a lot of access because of her previous work, bringing Italian culture and Italian thought to America. I enjoyed it. I think this is really good for if you're in my position where you're thinking of traveling and you just want some more context of why things are important or some ideas about different places. I think this would be a good one. And her tone is really good. For me, it's the right level of personal and also scholarly and leveraging insights from the region, from people in the region. So I do enjoy her writing on this stuff. Then I finished just a remarkable audiobook. This is a memoir that was narrated by the author. The book is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. So Michelle Zauner is Korean American, and it's just this beautiful, tender, poignant book about her identity and coming to terms with the death of her mother and her relationship with her mother and all the ways that it was challenging, all the ways that she didn't understand her mother, and all the ways that she's trying to look with fresh eyes at that relationship after her mother's passing. And so we're dealing with like grief, we're dealing with relationships and expectations, illness. There's a lot about illness and a lot about her mother's decline in here that was very I don't know if it was graphic, but it was real. It was honest. It wasn't sugar-coated. And a lot about food and about Korean food and palates and eating and belonging, and her trying to connect to her relationships with her family in Korea and her mother's family, and not really speaking the language, and this otherness. It was so well done. It was so beautiful. I highly recommend it. I thought it was a delight. Even though the subject matter was so sad and so upsetting. Next up, I did it. I read Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf with Elizabeth of Bookish North. It's a masterpiece. It is like, I wish I could go back and not know what I know and read it again. This will be a reread, 5-star. That's the penultimate for me. That means that I loved it so much. I want to revisit. There's still things to learn, things to see here. It has so much depth, so much to learn from the material. As you may probably or may not know, Mrs. Dalloway is a single day in the life of a few characters that we see. And it's a stream of consciousness book, but it's not as intimidating as I was led to believe. It is so much more approachable. I was afraid of this book for so long. I kind of likened it to James Joyce's Ulysses, and therefore just had all of this trepidation going in, like just be prepared. But my God, it is a masterpiece. The flow of how we are in her mind, and then we cross the street with someone else, and all of a sudden it's their point of view that we follow. It's like this. It's very cinematic. It's like you're just walking through this life. And London, I mean, when I talk about how much I'm missing travel and how I'm trying to capture something, the capturing of London and the streets and the memories that I have of some of these places, just spot on perfect. What I loved about it, and I didn't expect, is I can see the germination of the idea of the personal is political. This is a very anti-war novel that is not preachy, but is showing the impacts of war on specifically one character and his wife, Septimus, he is a broken man. He is a broken man. And his wife is trying to find help for him. But what we know about PTSD today versus what they knew then is just miles and miles apart. We have issues of propriety, and what used to happen was just kind of send them for rest in the countryside, just kind of get them away from other people, as opposed to really helping them deal with what they saw, what they lived through, and the ramifications of that on their life now as normal civilians. There's anti-colonialism in here. You know how much I love that, because there's a character who has come back from India, and he was a love interest, or he was in love with Clarissa, and Clarissa is the main character. She's Mrs. Dalloway, and she's having a party this evening, and so we see her in the morning going out looking for flowers for her party, and we get relationships and the tenuousness of relationships. That's what I love so much about this book. We have Peter, this man who just got back from India, and he is seeing Clarissa, and Clarissa seeing him, and they have such a long background, years and years of friendship. But it was always missed opportunities and expectations of each other that were never really met. And so there's a deep tenderness and a deep compassion for each other, but also disappointment that the other isn't who they want them to be. And I found that to be so real and so poignant and so sad. And we do it all the time. You know, there's all these things in here that she just picked out, how we are so many different things to so many different people. And I was stunned and shocked at how she was able to show a singular character and how that character interacts with all these people and the complexity and ways in which the people that we think we're supposed to, that I, as a reader, I would assume I would be expected to admire, aren't always so admirable. Yeah, it's absolutely magnificent. And I'm so glad that if you've never read Virginia Woolf and you're up for a project, reading them in publication order has allowed me to see where she's played with some of these techniques, and how it all came together. So it's like I can see the inner workings of how she was able to craft from trying it and experimenting in some of these earlier novels to getting here. It just makes me so excited to read To the Lighthouse, which is going to be what Elizabeth and I read this month. But absolute masterpiece. I will be rereading this every year on, this is Dalloway Day, which is a day in June. So yeah, feel free to join me next year in June and we'll read this on that day. Cannot wait. Then I read Transcendent Kingdom by Gyasi. This is my copy that I got from Shakespeare and Company. So for Christmas, my husband got me the Shakespeare and Company Year of Reading, which is a special thing they do where they send you 3 times a year, they'll send you this box, this package with all of these books in them. And each one has kind of a description of why the pick was there, as well as their gorgeous Shakespeare and Company stamp. You know, it just makes it feel also nice and authentic. Now, I have to say here, I'm going to take this little bit off. I have to say that I love this cover much better than I like the American cover. This is the UK edition cover, and I just think it's so beautiful. But this one didn't work for me. It did not work for me. It's the story of a young woman, Gifty, and Gifty is from the South. She is first generation. Her family, including her older brother, were all from Ghana. They moved to the South and they're living in Alabama. We go kind of back and forth in her memories. Current day, she lives in the Bay Area and she is a research person. She's doing research for her doctorate at Stanford. She's studying addiction and how it shows up in the brains of mice. And this is very personal to her because of some challenges that have kind of existed in her family. I don't want to give any spoilers away. But one thing that's not a spoiler to say is that her mother has shown up, and her mother has been dealing with such severe depression that when her mother comes to visit, she's really just taking over a bed and just staying in the bedroom. She does not get out of bed. Her depression is absolutely crippling. And you see some ways that Gifty is leveraging her science to try to find answers. It's a story of faith because the family grew up Pentecostal. That was one of the places that her mother found comfort as a new immigrant. And this Pentecostal church was not a Black church, but actually a white church. So otherness has been something that she's been dealing with her entire life. So we deal with otherness in the lab. She also deals with otherness related to faith and science. So there's a lot here. Now, I will say I loved Homegoing, which was her first novel. This is her second, and I'm going to I read this with my In Real Life book club, and we all want to give her a pass because Homegoing was just so remarkable. But this really felt flat. It it felt there's a remove here that I couldn't get into the characters. And I also felt like it was way too literal. There wasn't any nuance anywhere in here. Things were just laid out and explained to you. And you're just like, yeah, I get it. I've known that since, the first chapter. And so there's way too much of that. Not enough interiority, not any subtlety, any of the depth that we all frankly kind of expected. And the insights about the intersection between science and religion weren't really profound. They just kind of felt elementary. So very disappointed, very sad that I didn't love it because I really expected to, quite frankly. And lastly, I listened to an audiobook of a very delightful, wonderful, sweet book. This was Liar's Dictionary by Eley Williams. And in this, we have two timelines that are all centered around this dictionary. This is the Swansby Dictionary that has been worked on since Victorian era, and ultimately is really hitting stumbling blocks. And so we have a gentleman named Peter who is in the Victorian era, and he's working on the kind of helping out with creating this dictionary. And then we have a modern day woman named Mallory, and they seem to kind of there's a kind of trail that Peter leaves that Mallory picks up and gives her some insights into that something is awry with this dictionary. And there's some sabotage thematically happening. Is it external or internal? Mallory keeps getting harassing calls that she keeps picking up because they're trying to update the dictionary and bring it more up to date into modern times. And someone is very not pleased with the political nature of changing some of the words. And then when we go back to the earlier days, there's this gentleman working in, and he needs to input some words that kind of help for copyright, that if that word shows up in another dictionary, they can be sued for copyright infringement. Well, he gets a little excited about this creative opportunity to delightful ends. This was fun. It was clever without being clever. So I have a problem with clever books if it's too obvious. I like a witty book. I like a smart book, but I don't like it to be so like clever that there's a remove and a cockiness to it. And this didn't. This was just delightful. I thought it was well written. The structure was really fun. I just really enjoyed it. So if you like wordplay and, different timelines and things like that, then this might be a book that you would also enjoy very much. Okay, and then what am I reading now? I'm happy to say I'm back on the Proust train. So I know previously I've said, I haven't picked it up. Well, I have. And every time I do, I just enjoy it again. So back on the Proust train, very happy. This is volume 3, In Search of Lost Time, The Guermantes Way. Then I really wanted to read some of the books inspired by Mrs. Dalloway's, really close to having read Mrs. Dalloway. And Leo of A Little Book Life has raved about this, specifically the movie and also the book. This is The Hours by Michael Cunningham. Oh, I started it last night and my heart. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. So where Mrs. Dalloway was set in London, this is set in New York City. So we have that same vibe of a woman who's going to be setting up a party. And instead of PTSD and shell shock trauma, we have trauma from the AIDS crisis. And at first I was like, I don't know if I want to read so literal a recreation, but he's done masterful work. Just the first section, the first chapter and I'm completely hooked. It is beautiful. It is beautiful. So really looking forward to finishing this. And then for Women in Translation Month, I'm so excited to finally get started with this. I've talked about this for about 2 years. This is Alberta and Jacob by Cora Sandel. And look at this wacky cover here. I thought that Alberta and Jacob were lovers, but when I look at, but then I found out that they're brother and sister. But look at that cover. Like, what would you think? It's so confusing. Already, the atmosphere in this book, just from the very first paragraphs, has completely enchanted me. This is set in Scandinavia, and it's wintertime, and the cold and the darkness and the fires and the crispness of walking in across the snow and crackling the snow. It's everything. It's so fantastic. So I'm thoroughly enjoying this. And I love the fact that these two are only about 200 pages. So I think I'm going to be able to get through these very, very quickly. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I know this is a little longer. Apologies for that. But I'll get on back to my regular scheduled videos this week. And then I'm also going to be filming my BookTube Prize, both judging and reaction to the finals, which I'll be judging in as well. So that's it for me for now. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, unfortunately, still saying and returning back to saying, we are still in a global pandemic. Please maintain safe social distance, wear your masks, wash your hands, and don't touch your face. That's it for me for now. Bye.